old covenant, but they're manifested in Jesus in a personal way. God always wanted his people to be looking out for others' well-being. But as we consider when Jesus said, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments, he says, if you love me, you'll feed my sheep. So much of the text that we read is, if you love me, you'll love one another. And you'll find ways to serve one another. And that's really the liberty that we have under the Christian age. We are free to serve. Do you have any of the discussion questions that prompt additional insight that you'd like to discuss this evening? Any preparations for any of those, or any points you'd like to bring up? I think I'm going to draw our attention to number 5 if no one else has any. And I think because it also, it carries over, I think, or bridges to lesson 9 pretty well. Number 5 says, well, call me if you need anything. And then Wilson says, really? Can you think of a better way to serve others who are hurting or have needs? Being available is important. But what's the how strong of an invitation is that when someone says, well, give me a call if you can think of something?
But I know someone that he was not, he would never say anything about needing anything. And so one day I just said, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you just have to say, I'm going to do this, and do it.
And they tell you, no, I'm good, I don't need it. And it's still appreciated, I'll tell you. I'm going to cry at this lesson. I'm sorry. But this one is so, hits so home as I think about the ways that we bear one another's burdens and the fulfillment of that I've seen in our household. But I see it in others. There's a certain level of creativity with people that I don't have that skill set developed very well. If you need, or if you're sick and maybe all you can eat right now is maybe crackers, and then someone shows up with a case of crackers, you go, that's weird. But it says something about the thoughtfulness of the person who wanted to know, is there something that you can tolerate right now? And just overwhelmed then with that thing. But there have been a lot of pranksters in our neighborhood. They do ring and runs, and all of a sudden things show up on the doorstep. And it's not burning paper bags either. It's treats and goodies and gifts and tokens and the cards and the notes and the calls. And, we have Afghans in the house. We have blankets. But there's like an Afghan or a blanket everywhere you look right now because of the number that have been gifted to Allison. She can't get warm. She's cold all the time. And sometimes she's under 3 and 4 of those Afghans at the same time. But as I see those things, even though we still have blankets in the closet, they're a reminder to me of the intent behind those gifts. And they are, as are described here, a way to bear one another's burdens. I'm going to try to get this under control, but I told you, just going through here. The bear up, to bear one another's burdens, to carry, different translations, to share in, some say. There's a International Standard Version, practice carrying each other's burdens. So it makes it more of a regular thing, or a consistent thing in one's life, the practice of carrying one another's burdens. There was another version that had sort of this connotation of always carry others' burdens. To rally to one side, to come to someone in their need. The contemporary English translation said, you obey the law of Christ when you offer each other a helping hand. These things are expressions of gratitude. Gratitude for what's been done for me, how I've been blessed, how I want to express my gratitude by how I can bless others. Motivation for putting myself out there when burdens are heavy. Thankfulness for other people. I mean, the best way for one to truly bear someone else's burden is to understand that burden. Maybe you haven't been there or something similar yourself, or haven't seen it in your family, and appreciating the gravity of it. But then you just, you have an appreciation for other people because of how you've been blessed. Galatians chapter 6, verse 1 and 2. I think I've kind of always tied these together and maybe limited my perspective on what this burden might mean. Brethren, if a man is caught in trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, each one looking to yourself, lest you be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and we'll get into some of the usage of these words here in a minute. Bear one another's burdens, and thus fulfill the law of Christ. I think that there is a broader sense than just when someone's in sin that's implied in this text. You read, if you go down to verse 10, so then while we have opportunity, let us do good to all men, and especially to those who are of the household of faith. So this obligation in verse 1 is clearly an obligation between brothers and sisters in Christ. Verse 2, though, can expand out to other people, and verse 10 reinforces the idea that this idea of bearing one another's burdens is a universal concept, especially of the household. But it's made clear that while we have opportunity, all men have burdens. Women, too. All mankind has a load to carry. And as we've talked earlier about fulfilling these one another commands, and how having arranged yourself as a part of a local congregation is critical to create opportunities. One could be carrying the burdens and bearing the burdens of those that are not in a church family. It's stated right here. But then you wouldn't be able to fulfill the second piece of, in particular, those that are of your spiritual heritage, those that are aligned with you. Do good to all men. I wanted to look at this just a second. Is there ever a congregation of God's people who don't have loads or burdens to bear? Do we know of any congregation to where everyone has just got everything going just the way that they want it to? I don't think we know of a place like that. Doesn't exist in my mind even. Webster's says that opportunity, the definition of opportunity, there's second and third definitions, but the first definition was a conjuncture of circumstances. Now, what does that mean? An opportunity is a conjuncture of circumstances. That means there is a burden, and there's ability to help with that burden. And so you have a conjuncture of circumstances. Someone needs help, and someone else can help. That's the root definition of opportunity. And as I look through the secondary third definitions, they still had the same connotation of this. An opportunity is not, I feel like helping someone today, or it would be convenient for me to help someone so I can help someone today who has a burden. But the conjuncture of circumstances is someone needs help, and there's got to be someone else that can help with that problem. There's got to be. That's going to require knowing about the needs of one another. But it doesn't mean that I have to wait until I feel like it's a good time for it to be an opportunity. And I think that's how I kind of have viewed that word in the past. But by looking it up, it reinforced what I thought the text was saying. As you have opportunity, do good to all men. That's a broad statement. I got a call, it's been 2.5, 3 weeks ago now. I don't remember what I was doing, where I was. I might have been in Indianapolis. I don't remember. I get a call, and it's our youngest daughter. Well, it was Sunday night. Sunday. I'll get this right yet. It was Sunday afternoon, and I got the call, and I missed the call, and I called her back. I hear all this road noise, highway noise. And I said, what's going on? She says, well, I got a flat tire. And I said, well, that's great. Where are you? And she said, well, I'm north of Columbus, Ohio. That was about 3 hours, 45-minute drive. She had a need. I didn't have an opportunity right then. It was not going to work for me to do a 7-hour turnaround to put the donut spare on her car and have her drive it back to Columbus. So I said, you're going to have to get into the back of the vehicle and find your spare and find the jack handle, and I can talk you through this. And as I'm talking to her, and I said, you can't call anyone because it's Sunday evening, so all the shops are closed. As I'm talking to her, I hear another voice. And she says, hold on a minute. And she's talking to a gentleman that found her on the side of the road. Now, what was funny about this is she told me more about this experience. It was 2 days later before I got some details on it. But needless to say, this gentleman helped her put the donut spare on her car. And instead of trying to make the 4-hour drive, well, it would have been 5 or 6 at that point, back to Columbus, Indiana, she turned around and went back to her sister's house. That was about 25 minutes away. When I got to the vehicle, when it was back in Columbus, Monday she had got 2 new tires put on the vehicle. But in the rear was one of those, is the tire that blew. And it's negligence on my part. I guess the dry rot was so bad on this tire. The thing was a handful of tire. I scooped out like a 32-ounce cup of crumbs, powdered rubber that was in the back of this vehicle. And I said, what is all this mess? And she says, well, that's the tire. She doesn't know tires aren't supposed to do that when they go flat. I said, well, where is the rest of it? She said, oh, there were big chunks everywhere. So she had just a massive tire failure. She hit something, an object on the road, and it was enough with that dry rotted tire. Now, there were two almost new tires on the car, but there were two that weren't. And she hit something, and that thing just exploded. So she drove it off the interstate on the rim. And she tells me about the fella who pulled up and started talking to her. He was an older gentleman, probably my age or older. And he's African American, and she's in a very African American community in Columbus. And he said, well, I saw you get off the highway, and I thought, oh my, what's going on here? He said, so I was watching you. And he said, when you got out of the car, I said, oh, Lance, she's just a baby. And I love that because I don't know this guy's name, but I saw the compassion and the heart of a father. And he said, honey, we got to get you back on the road and get you out of here. This is not the neighborhood for you. And he changed the tire, and she turned around and went back to her sister's. She drove then and got the tires at the tire dealer. Yuri helped her find a place that was good, and 2 more tires. So now it's almost 4 brand new tires on that Chevrolet that she's driving to school. But there was opportunity for the fella in Columbus who saw this helpless girl, baby, pull off a limping car into an empty parking lot and approached and helped. That is a burden that he bore for her, but he doesn't know how much he also helped out a frustrated dad in Columbus, Indiana at the same time. Because we actually had gone through and did some of the, here's how you check your oil. Oil, what's that? It's that black stuff that's in the bottom of the engine. It's supposed to be brown, but in your case, it's probably black because we haven't changed it in a long time. Here's how you check the tire pressure. Went through a couple other things. But we didn't cover dry rotted tires, and we didn't cover mounting spare from the trunk. Fortunately, it was in serviceable condition. The effort that goes into doing something like that probably took him 15, 20 minutes. But the amount of relief for Rebecca that someone was so kind to someone who was so helpless is just immeasurable. We'll never know the depth of a person's desperation and what a little thing that may be done that completely changes the attitude. We'll never know. Oh, that person may come back and just say, oh man, you really helped me out. But the level of anxiety for Rebecca that afternoon was really high. I could tell it in her voice. And mine was starting to creep up pretty quick. And I was thinking, well, we're going to have to get Yuri to come get his truck and get you out of there or something if you can't figure this out. So there were probably some other options there. But we help others because we're grateful for what we have. And our opportunities are not just when it's convenient, but it's a conjuncture of circumstances. If there is a need and I can fulfill it, then that's the juncture. That's the meeting of 2 elements, need and ability. Contrasting Galatians 6:2 and Galatians 6:5, I think hopefully you've read that, and I thought that Wilson did a good job of sort of running through that for us. Does anyone want to take that and just kind of compare those two, Galatians 6:5 and the usage, and let's just point out the potential conflict here. Verse 2 says, bear one another's burdens, fulfill the law of Christ. 5 says, for each one shall bear his own burden. So How is that reconciled? How is that done? Because I'm talking too much. Anyone want to just walk through that for us, please? It's pretty straightforward, right? Yeah, both can be true. They're going to be different circumstances. The word usage is a little different. Dan.
Yeah, like I said, that's the first time I've actually seen it spelled out. That one that is meaning, even though most Bibles have the same word, burden is a burden. They're actually, the root meaning is completely different. One's a light pack, and the other one's a heavy, something unbearable, something you can't, a burden you can't bear on your own. But there's also another. I'm going to throw another one out there. If you a family should take care of its own, or it has its own responsibility. A father should take care of, make sure that provide for his own family. And that's another one that I've always been very, I would say I've always looked at that as there's only a problem or there's only a need if the family can't take care of it of its own, within its own group. And that's why I said that I've always thought of it that way. That because I don't know that it's been taught that necessarily, but the way it reads, if you're just on the surface reading something like that, you should take care of your own. So anytime that I've considered that, it's always been, hey, that's the family's responsibility first, and we can step in if we need to, if the family can't handle that itself.
How's your view? Keep the mic. How has your view been modified since you say that was your first impression?
Well, it's just like anything else. I mean, the more you think about it, because it's not something I even thought about without reading, this book, or it's always been one of those things, probably handed down, because that's how we always considered it. Things are handled within the family, and if it can't be handled within the family, then you look outside for help.
So you're saying your perspective on that passage has changed based upon understanding that there are burdens that are individual still and to be borne by an individual, but there are things that are just an overwhelming burden, and they can be just too difficult. I mean, loading a sofa, it may not be a heavy sofa, but if you're going to load a sofa in the back of a truck, you kind of need a person on each end at minimum, and if it's a sleeper, you better have two on each end. I know one person may be able to lift that load, but you can't. They're just too big and bulky. Well, okay, then getting up down the stairs then. You're right. You're not going to balance that sofa on your shoulder, even though the weight of it itself, if it was in a more compact form, you could probably, one person could probably carry a love seat in a sofa, depending on what it is. But the change in perspective is, it's not a hard, fast rule that it must be a family member, although there's the duty for families to be providing for the responsibilities of their own household. But that doesn't mean others can't step in and help with that. And it depends on what the burden is too, right? Because, there are burdens that are to be carried that have several elements to them. One could be the physical nature of a heavy load, but there could also be the emotional burden that goes with, how am I going to deal with this problem? So you might have one person who helps with the actual weight, the physical weight, but you may have another person who helps with the emotional weight, depending on what's going on.
I think my first the example comes when Dad had his first stroke back in 2000. He was in Jacksonville, Florida, and my mom and my sister went down, and then I was going to go down a couple of days later. And several people offered to help me buy a plane ticket to get down there. I said, no, we can handle that within the family, because I did not want to use funds that could be used for those that also had need, but maybe somebody could help out now. But we handled that easily within the family, so that wasn't a problem. But I always in my back of my mind was, I don't want to use funds from others when those could be spent for people who are in worse need than myself. And those are the kind of things, the thought process I went through. But yet, I did get support, emotional support from other people.
Sure. I think that is a part of your character of stewardship. You can fix things that other people would throw away and get a new one of, you know. Dan has certain attributes for making things work that I wouldn't have been able to figure out how to make it work. And I think that's an element of you use judiciously what you have, because you might need it for later. You might need, you know, for a different purpose. But there's still the offer itself, genuine, I assume, is just a way to take something off your mind. And I'll have to go and transfer some funds, or I'll have to go. There's just there's all kinds of ways to get at the different elements of carrying one another's burdens, and emotional burden, and or maybe it's figuring something out. You know, Rebecca kind of knew I wasn't going to show up and fix her tire when she called me, but you know, she calls mom when she doesn't want me to yell at her, and she calls mom when she wants things, certain things. She calls me when she wants money and auto repairs. And so that was her first inclination, but and so we just started talking through it. But I needed to provide some calming and some emotional support as we kind of figured out what was going on when God sent a helping hand and kind of presented a solution for us. That was the best.
Brace is the one who alerted me to this a couple weeks back when he mentioned it. I too didn't know initially that these were different words. Bear one another's burden. Each should bear his own load. The each should bear his own load is the same word Jesus used when he says, "My burden is light." Mm-hmm. That's the word that Jesus uses. It's the same one in this passage, and when I learned that, I looked at the definitions, and it's literally the idea of the cargo of a ship, or the charter of a ship, and the cargo that it needs to carry. It's a responsibility that it's tasked with, and so you could almost look at this as bear one another's burdens. That word can refer to pains, troubles, setbacks, things that hurt and weigh us down, and then each should bear his own charge. Each should bear his own responsibility. And so that's a way to view these as complementary of each other.
So it's the idea of a manifest. There's a certain amount of lading that would fit in a ship. As long as you didn't exceed its weight capacity, then that manifest is what that ship is designed and capable of carrying. Mm-hmm. You overload that ship, or you put a couple burr holes in the bottom of the vessel, and you've got all different set of issues.
And I think one other lesson we can see from this is if we focus too hard on verse 5 and took that as you've got to take care of everything yourself, you've got to bear all the pain yourself, you're only made better if you suffer. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we get it in our heads that I need to suffer for this, or I've got to suffer through this, and I've got to even make it harder on myself. I have a bad habit of skipping meals when I'm at work. I won't pack a lunch on days when I'm stressed or anxious, and I don't know if that's me trying to, make the day more punishing, so somehow I'm more rewarded at the end of the day. It never works out. I end up grumpy and hungry, but it's wrong to get the idea that I ought to suffer, I ought to bear more pain and just tough it out, and that's going to make me better. It's perfectly fine to say there's pain and there's burden that needs to be lifted, and I need to, if folks aren't volunteering, ask for it to be lifted. Don't just wait if it's not happening. Maybe sometimes people need a little prompting.
Andrew grew up in my house. I know he likes to eat. We tried to feed him for years, and it was a struggle sometimes to keep up. But someone could share him lunch. But there are burdens that people take upon themselves that they don't have to, that there's absolutely no way they can carry those themselves. And probably the most prevalent one in society is loneliness. If you burden yourself with loneliness by withdrawal from other people, there's absolutely no way you're going to manage that burden yourself, because the only solution is to other people. The only solution is contact and interaction. And I think that is very likely one of the most common burdens among God's people today, especially if we are in a stage of life where we don't have the family members that we once had with us. And to Susan's point, you just do it. Because who wants to say, "Oh, I'm just lonely"? And I'll talk to a stump. It doesn't matter who it is. I'll talk to him. You don't have to talk. I'll do the talking. Because I need human interaction. But it's so hard to ask for. Yes, Samantha. Here, you just talking to this.
Well, I think it's all about being observant and looking around you and seeing what the needs of other people are so that they don't have to constantly ask.
That's right. That's right. It's not bearing one another's burdens. That's waiting to be told what to do. And it means you have to know people, and you have to be paying attention. And this is one of my real weak areas. Is getting I'm clueless sometimes to how other people feel and what's going on. I may understand the physical situation, but I may be way off base in terms of the emotional impact or the spiritual impact. Because physical needs, physical burdens can have spiritual impacts. Spiritual burdens can have physical impacts. They cross over because we are body, soul, and spirit. And if you got one of those sick, it often sickens or weakens the other as well. I wasn't going to talk a lot tonight. Who else wants to talk for a while? Does that all make sense? There are always going to be expectations, and that I'm glad. Did you tell him that one, Brace, about the ship's manifest? And he must have done a little digging on that one. Makes a lot of sense in that it's within tolerances, right? If I've got something that has been charged to me as a vessel, and it is a load that is within my capacity, it's not meant to be a burden. It's not meant to be an overburden, because it's been designed specifically to my capacity to carry it. You can't put in a oil tanker the same thing you can put in someone's backpack. They're both vessels, or someone's thermos in their lunchbox. They're all vessels, but they have different design and they have different capacity. And we are that way too. But as long as it's a burden, as long as it's one that has been ordained for that kind of vessel and it's the right size. But there are things that are beyond our capacity. And even when we have those burdens that are within our own ability, there's nothing that says, there's no limit to when you can help someone. I appreciate that thought. Like I said, I've opened the door. Andrew again.
I sort of took an interest in question 7. What would be how would it energize the church if there were fewer celebrities and more servants? And I thought about, those two words. I think when the energy of a church, because there are churches that we see examples of, that I think their energy comes from charismatic preaching or charismatic individuals, celebrity individuals. I mean, there's some churches or organizations out there that are led by some very well-known, well-regarded people in society or in their community. But when a church is led and energized by a well-recognized individual, that energy fades when that person does. Whether that person reaches the end of their work, the end of their life, or they do something bad, something comes up and they've now become notorious instead of famous, the reputation and usually the existence of that church goes down with them when it's been tied to that person. So if we're thinking now, how do servants operate? I think acts of service are perpetuating. An act of service, especially when it's done to you, if someone does something kind to you, it's a lot easier to imitate that, and it's easier to be inspired to do that same thing when you've seen it done. It's harder to try to, we don't have to think that we need to bottle up the charisma that someone else has, or we need to capture and emulate the way they speak or the way they teach, or adopt their characteristics in order to be successful. It's so much easier to say, this act of kindness that someone did to me, I can do that too. It's far simpler to capture that and mimic and imitate that than trying to have lightning strike twice and be a celebrity like someone else is.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Joyce, got some ideas. I think it's more genuine too, instead of trying to mimic someone else. Or I wish I could do. You've heard that before. I wish I could do something the way X does it. Well, do your thing the way you do it, and you'll be better off.
I'm still thinking about the burdens and the loads. A burden can be different for a child than for an adult. Specifically, I can't help but think about Carter. He's got a dad, he's got a brother, he's got a grandpa.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have a mom. There are things that their neighbor Ashley can do that's a burden we can't even relate to, but that his family can't. What he has is existing family. Their family is not local extended family. It's in California. So just that, what are burdens at 8? May not be the same wouldn't be the same as a burden when you're older. My mom is still with me, but I'm not 8 and losing her. I mean, it's just different with different ages and capacities, skills.
Well, different vessels. Different vessels have different utilization. And it's where as we understand one another, there's going to be some of you that just you know what a young mother's going through when the baby's been back from the hospital for a week better than I do. I remember watching some of that and knowing of some of the feelings that Allison went through as a new mom, and it's like, it's not that the shine is worn off, but the glamour of, they all wave when you leave the hospital, bye, have a good life, and you take this baby home and you go, what do I do now? This thing's here and it's not going back to the hospital. It's going to stay here from now on. And am I up to that? Sorry, I'm scaring Addie when I talk like that. It's not that bad. But my wife can relate to that a lot better than I can. I saw it. I tried to help her as I could. But it was other mothers who had seen it firsthand that were the ones to. And they don't take it away. I mean, it doesn't say take away other people's burdens. It says help carry them. So you come alongside. Doesn't mean that you have the magic bullet. And that should not be a means by which we shirk opportunity. Well, I just don't know what to do. Well, maybe you just need to sit there and shut up and listen to them talk. And maybe that's all you really need to do. Or maybe you just need to go to the grocery store and get a gallon of milk. And if you have to ring the doorbell and run because you're scared to talk to them, you at least did that much. But maybe, especially, I've noticed this too, there'll be a small an easily met need of an older person, and you go, I could take care of this and it wouldn't be any trouble at all, and I could get that done. But I know I'm going to be spending 45 minutes talking to him if I go over. And then I go, oh, no, I got 45 minutes. Just because we don't understand fully how a problem impacts other people doesn't mean we can't help. We don't have to be psychologists and figure everything out perfectly. And you can misread people, and it doesn't matter. If someone thinks you need a loaf of bread and they bring you a kitten, the gesture was appreciated, but the kitten may not be, you know. But if people are honest, they'll say, well, thanks for the kitten. And they'll appreciate the effort because it says, I cared enough to leave you a kitten when I needed a loaf of bread. All right. Well, you're going to pick up because there's a lot of good stuff here in this lesson still. So I want to sort of take up with number 2 a little bit. There's kind of the four burdens that Wilson launches into here, and I want to cover those. I think they're good material. Okay? So if you want to say about middle of page 50, that's kind of where we sort of got to. Thank you.